In a long and distant past that stood between the 2000s and the 2010s, there would be some genres that accommodated for the desire to kill an endless amount of enemies, where hordes of enemies would have one singular goal, to just kill you, and your goal was to kill them and survive. This mode of gameplay would be fulfilled in the guise of game modes, on top of the other existing content in other games. Look at the Firefight mode from Halo, or the Horde mode from Gears of War. Both franchises from the Bungie era and the Epic Games era had great campaign and multiplayer experiences that were rejoiced by many Xbox owners, and Horde-based modes became the cherry on top that also became a favorite for some in both communities. There would be many examples of other games with game modes, even iconic ones like Call of Duty Zombies dating back to World at War, where they are still being played to this very day. Then you have games centered around Horde systems in games like Left 4 Dead, Deep Rock Galactic, Vermintide, and Darktide, where they create a combination of objectives that the teams must complete, all the while dealing with hordes across the map. These type of games generally provided the most consistent opportunities to experiment with various weapons and equipment to strive for longer records, as well as improving one's aim or movement, all the while helping players unwind because of the immediacy behind the gameplay. You're not waiting for story to get in the way or exposition that you don't care much about. The gameplay takes the driver's seat and breaks the speed limit, giving you action before anything else in the loop. The flavor of gameplay made endless violence a comfort of sorts, where you could just get straight to the point and start killing right away, and sometimes that's all that people want. Well, there have been many iterations and incarnations of horde-based gameplay through tower defense, bullet hell, strategy, shooters, you name it, where they all work to do their own spin on the formula of horde modes. But what has and what will continue to happen as time goes on is that two genres will mix, or two different games will combine together, creating a fusion that presents a unique formula to the idea of horde modes, or wave-based modes in other terms. Well, here I will be talking about three notable games that seem to combine the simple but fast-paced nature of boomer shooters, or movement shooters, with the progression-based gameplay of Vampire Survivors, and here I present first-person survivors, or just FPS survivor-likes if you prefer. Vampire Survivors and the survivors-like genre of games operate on the idea of progression being the game. The more efficiently you can grind XP and obtain your build in quick succession, the better your chances of completing a run. There is generally an automatic approach to the combat where your weapons and abilities are fired for you, allowing you to laser focus more on your movement and dart around the arena, dodging the infinitely spawning enemies that gradually get more difficult over time. Now, there are hundreds of these games, and they have flooded the Steam marketplace like the day after tomorrow, and are even grouped into the roguelike genre as well as bullet hells. I've played a few of these survivor-likes, and some of them are really good and add their own spin to the table. However, it wouldn't be long until someone would come along and add the idea of Vampire Survivor-style gameplay into the FPS genre. So far, I have found three notable titles that I enjoyed quite a lot. Two have been released and can be played now, and the other one is still currently in development, but has a demo that you can try out, which I will of course place in the description. And while I'm sure that there are others that I have missed or some that I just haven't heard of yet, I'm bound to come across them eventually if I continue to explore the fusion of FPS and survivor-likes. So, let's start off with the first subject, which is none other than Vampire Hunters. Since my discovery of Vampire Survivors and the continual descendants of the game that popularized the gameplay that was around before it, Magic Survival being an earlier example than Vampire Survivors, I eventually found out that an FPS equivalent was already made, which made it the first Survivors-like shooter that I found that was directly inspired by Vampire Survivors. Now, I don't know if it was exactly the first game, or some would say that there were plenty of arena shooters that came well before this one, and you would be correct in that sense. But to once again emphasize, the focus of this video is on FPS games with Vampire Survivors gameplay and progression in mind, hence the term FPS survivor-likes. And Vampire Hunters fits the bill here, but in its own way. For starters, you're already within a genre that combines the necessity for manual aiming and movement, and Vampire Hunters will require your raw aim and ability to navigate in a 3D space with some verticality on top of it. Its biggest and most noticeable characteristic though is the sheer volume of guns displayed on screen. So you take the progression system of Vampire Survivors, then the multi-gun based gameplay of Potato, mash them both into an FPS, and then you would have Vampire Hunters. When you first start off, you just have your starting weapon as well as your starting character, and each character has their own distinct differences between each other. Over time, you'll be able to either select a new weapon which gets added to the screen, or upgrade your existing weapon to make it more powerful. Either way, you'll eventually be doing both as the levels progress. Either way, you'll be doing both as the run progresses. Also, like Vampire Survivors, enemies will be bum rushing towards your direction as if an infinite pool of magnets started becoming attracted to you. But the more weapons and upgrades that you can obtain, the more efficiently that you can successfully wipe out droves of mobs, which is ultimately the goal of survivor-like games, or bullet heavens as some people call them. At certain points across your run, you'll also face bosses that give you additional items that you can pick up after they've been killed, and if you've played your cards right, you can just get to the end and 100% the level and its content. Now, so far in my experience with Vampire Hunters, I haven't quite reached that stage yet, but what I can say is that the game has been a blast in the short span of time that I've put into it, and at some point, I may even do a video on it after I have some more experience with the game and I can go more in depth into it. But so far, here are some of the things that I really liked about this game. I really dig the campy and lighthearted tone that matches with the low poly but charming visuals. Kind of gives me a similar vibe to Vampire Survivors, but with, 3D and polygons on top of it. The music is also really fun to listen to and really sets that mood for that Survivors-like session that you may sometimes want. The synergy between the amount of weapons that you can combine and shoot simultaneously is incredible here, on top of how many weapons you can actually have on the screen. One run, I may just want to have a bunch of pirate cannons, revolvers, or shotguns, and from there you can mix even more weapons into your play session. Of course, so if the goal is to win earlier, then you would want to look up existing builds or gun combinations for the most optimal playthrough. In saying that though, for anyone that's just getting into Vampire Hunters, the best experience that you will have will be the one where you go in blind and just try everything out. Because once you have it all figured out before you've even played it, it just becomes meaningless, and it's like, what's the point of even going into the game any further once you've, already had it figured out, like a puzzle that you haven't even solved yet but know the answer to. Now, in the beginning, you'll eventually die and you may not even feel like that you're strong enough early on. But don't worry too much about that though. It's generally a common thing in roguelites or survivor-likes where the player is usually expected to gradually work towards progressing for permanent upgrades that can make future runs easier. Vampire Hunters is no exception in this case. Each run, win or lose, will give you the resources needed to acquire permanent upgrades, and from this point on, it's a matter of trial and error until you eventually start securing successful runs, giving the player tangible progress through progression rewards. Whether you win or lose a run is something that a lot of roguelites often do, and some of them do them really well, and despite the permanent element to a playthrough, they add enough fun factor into the gameplay where the player doesn't really feel as much of a sting in regards to a permanent loss as much. If you're making a roguelite and can get the player to say one more run, then you've already succeeded, and in my book, Vampire Hunters definitely succeeds in that case. And each playthrough I would always have that desire to go at it again and see if I can do it better. What I also like about Vampire Hunters, and it's something that other FPS survivor-like seem to do as well, is give me the option to let me fire manually. I'm so used to firing manually in other shooters that I just don't like the idea of attacking automatically when I want the choice of where and when to shoot. Plus, it adds a layer of skill to the experience in a genre like survivor-likes, where it's less about the skill of a player and more about the knowledge towards efficient and consistent progression before things get harder and your DPS can't match the endgame threats during the run. If you're looking for a game with a similar vibe and campy tone as Vampire Survivors but with more than 10 guns to wield in a 3D space, then this is the one to go for. Number 2 on this extremely short list is Dieseldome Oil and Blood. Now, this is the demo that I was referring to, but what's already there is showing a lot of promise, and from a thematic point of view, it is the most unique one I've found so far, because the concept of its setting is really cool. Dieseldome Oil and Blood is a fusion of the movement shooter genre. Think along the lines of Ultra Kill or Severed Steel or Titanfall 2, combined with the survivor-like gameplay that you see in the hundreds of other survivor-likes, including, well, Vampire Survivors. Its set piece pits you in a world where Rome itself never crumbled. They never really went through the dark ages or became a crumbling city that tourists visit nowadays, but an empire that lasted throughout a much longer period of history and are still on top. In fact, it's Rome, but with petrol, and with petrol comes many advancements in technology that made the Romans in this game rule with an iron fist. The 3 characters are but gladiators of different backgrounds in a diesel punk-like version of Rome where you exist to entertain its eternal citizens by killing waves of Roman units, obtaining upgrades and new skills, holding positions to win favors, and lasting until a certain amount of time to seize victory, i.e., surviving for X amount of minutes until the run is finished. The 3 characters share similar movement tech, but have some unique differences that set them apart. For example, Spartacus has a shoulder charge that can be used mid-air and on ground level, and can be used to damage enemies along the way. This is good for cleaning some fodder while making a quick escape while you make space or obtain some healing items scattered all over the arena. Ignatius has a grenade launcher alt-fire mode that can perform an AoE attack on enemies, but can also be used to propel you backwards or up in the air, giving you something akin to a rocket jump or a rocket boost, a well-known technique used in arena shooters when a player needs a bigger jump. Brutus has a grappling hook that can latch onto objects, pulling with the S and moving with A and D. With these unique traits, on top of their weapons of choice, they also emphasize a style of gameplay that may cater to a player that may want more movement, more verticality, or just more DPS numbers to pull off. When I first played it a while ago, there were significant FPS drops that ultimately ruined the experience for me, but thankfully the issues didn't come to pass when I tried the demo again, which I guess was a result of further patching and further optimization to ensure a smoother experience. The gunplay here is very solid, the movement is excellent, the feedback on enemy kills is great, and the movement even lets you do things like wall running, or let you slide into a tunnel that you can then go with the speed of Sonic, that then throws you up into the sky where you can get some sweet airtime, pulling some cool shots here and there, or just because it's fun. Movement is just very fun, it's very vertical, you can go up into the air very quickly, you can dash and charge through enemies like fodder, and the design of the arena gives you plenty of opportunities to pull off some interesting tricks, plenty of places to retreat to pick up some more health if needed. Things like that give the game not only just breathing room for the player, but also just freedom to move about and just boom and shoot. But my favorite aspect of this game so far is the aesthetic. The game markets itself as a Roman punk game. It takes a spin on an existing empire that was truly ahead of its time and illustrates them in a world run by oil and blood, with some diesel punk mixed into their technology and unit designs. There's even a tank that is covered in Roman shields, a very familiar and eerily disturbing scream that reminds me of another game. The unit designs in general are just really cool. The setting is just cool. And I love it when settings take something medieval or ancient and fuse it with either Victorian, industrial, or early 20th century technology. And this game revels in those kind of ideas, which, by the way, hasn't even been fully explored in Dieseldome yet. This game is only really just getting started, and from what I've read, there are core features that that have yet to be added, which could mean that the game could be a lot more under its belt than just being another survivor-like shooter. With a setting like this, it would be a waste to not explore it to its fullest and go wild with a Roman Empire powered by oil setting. In the description, you'll find this game, and I would highly recommend checking the demo out if you want a game with an interesting setting to go with it. The third piece of my brief but fun exploration of this flavor of FPS is Bloodshed. Bloodshed, when I first saw it, had the DNA of a boomer shooter mixed into it, mainly from its gameplay style, the retro-inspired low-poly graphics on top of these sprite-based enemies that you fight. It was a game with an old-school touch to it, at least visually speaking. But what if you took the boomer shooter style aesthetics and gameplay and mixed it with survivor-like mechanics on top of its progression system? Well, Bloodshed seems to be that. Like Vampire Hunters, it's complete and you can play through all of its available content now. It also shares a somewhat campy tone, but has more of a focus on the Castlevania-inspired aesthetics, whereas Hunters has different locales with their own set pieces and vibes. Bloodshed seems to also have more of a centralized story, where all of the areas that you go to are connected by the game's main antagonist faction, the Cult. Their goal is to bring about a powerful entity that wants to bring the apocalypse and, well, destroy everything. The main enemies consist of cultists, undead shambling corpses that throw stuff, and demonic hordes, all working together to stop you from completing your run. Well, in boomer shooter fashion with a dash of survivors-like, you'll be stopping that from happening by acquiring permanent upgrades, obtaining new weapons, new abilities, and items, all the while upgrading and surviving the endless onslaught until your goal is completed. Oh yeah, that's another thing. Bloodshed actually has a story-esque progression defined by chapters and missions, but it's more so in the sense of objectives rather than a narrative that promises dialogue. Each mission in the 2 chapters that you have consists of differing requirements for how long you last. The first one is 5 minutes, and then it goes from 15 to 30 minutes throughout the experience. Well, my experience anyways. At the end of each chapter, you have a boss fight, which breaks up the repetition of just surviving X amount of minutes until the time runs out or you die. Then there are also bonus missions that you unlock by finding gold coins that are hidden on the map. They're a pain in the ass to find as the mission goes along, but if you make an effort early, then you may be able to find 1 or 2, or if you're lucky, all 3, without getting too much pressure from the endless hordes, that is. When you have enough gold coins, you can then unlock a bonus mission that could either be completing multiple objectives or one where you go from room to room and do target practice. Another thing that also sets this game apart from the other 2, as well as other survivors likes, is that this game can actually be finished in a matter of hours, and is actually one of the more forgiving survivor-like experiences that I've played. Usually in a survivor-like, you're expected to grind for a considerable amount of time before you can really start making further progress and see what the rest of the game has to offer. In Bloodshed, you can complete Chapter 1 and 2 even if you've just bought a few permanent upgrades. The third chapter is really just an extra mode where you can customize your own run, set the amount of resource pickups, the difficulty, as well as the amount of time that you want to survive for, which does add some more replayability to the relatively short experience that it provides. But what you do have is a pretty damn solid survivor-like game that can be beaten in a shorter amount of time. The cast of characters all have really neat designs, save for the last 2 because I haven't unlocked them and I don't know what they look like yet. A variety of guns that have their own distinct advantages and disadvantages and are still fun to use, and each character has their own unique ability that, like Dieseldome, sets them apart from other characters. So far, characters like Jared, Sakura, and Father Fidelis have been my favorite characters to run, primarily because they have useful utilities, and Sakura and Father Fidelis have melee weapons that don't suck. Bloodshed has some fun music, great atmosphere and levels to run through, simple but enjoyable gameplay on top of well-made sprite work and mechanics that don't ask too much from you, but give you plenty of means to make progress once you bring them to life in your runs. For those that are looking for a survivor-like experience that doesn't ask for too much of a grind, but offers instead some quick and manageable boomer shooter style gameplay with some survivor-like touches, then Bloodshed would be the one that I recommend out of the three. And that's it for my brief but short Expedition 33 expedition in my recent discovery of the FPS side of the survivor-like genre. Like I said earlier, there are probably other titles that I may have missed or don't know about yet, but if you have any further suggestions as to what I should try out, then feel free to suggest some in the comments. Now, these type of survivor-likes are more of my style than the traditional ones like Death Must Die or Halls of Torment or Brotato. Just, having that 3D space on top of these satisfying vertical movements supported by fun gunplay just makes for some enjoyable horde-based action that's different from other types of horde-based shooters and other survivor-likes. In the past, I discovered roguelites mixing with FPS in games like Deadlink, RoboQuest, Gunfire Reborn, and Battle Shapers, but it's good to know that now that there are other forms of roguelite-styled FPSs that I can also enjoy, and I'm absolutely down for trying out more survivor-like FPS games, if what I've experienced has already impressed me this much. Sometimes you just don't need a story or a rich setting, even though it's appreciated when it's there. Sometimes Arena is all you need to keep yourself entertained, and that's what survivor-likes and arena-based shooters and, horde-based shooters excel at. An arena where you can dance as many times as you want. And, it's something that I'm just not getting tired of anytime soon. Stay safe, everyone, and thanks for watching.